So I'm very excited to be here. I have a lot to cover in this presentation. So if you would have questions related to the research that we have done, the specific use cases of VR or web VR specifically, I will be here the rest of the day to address all these questions. So this is a comprehensive overview. So first of all, a bit about me. So I've been working in consumer and media tech for almost 10 years. How is the sound actually? Is that good? Okay. I've been working in consumer tech for almost 10 years, working with startups. I've been worked in social media with Netlog, and then I started working in online video distribution in London. I came back to Brussels to co-found a media publication called Tech.eu. In 2015, I had my first virtual reality experience on a Samsung Gear VR headset, and I was completely convinced that this would be the new platform. So this is the agenda of the day. I already covered it a bit. So I'm going to talk about the market. I'm going to talk about the use cases in sports and VR specifically, and then I'm going to introduce web VR. Apart from being very active in the industry, I'm also a big a supporter of women active in the industry. So I co-founded Women in XR. XR is a combination of XR, of MR, VR, and AR. So today we are 350 members. It's a Facebook group. And the objective, of course, is to link, to enable an inclusive network of women active in the industry. I'm an economist from background, and when I started focusing on the VR industry in Europe, I was a bit lost. In a lot of consulting agreements, I started the session with the landscape of Tipatat. It's a similar one, but an internationally focused. Tipatat is one of the co-founders of the VR Fund. It's a San Francisco-based fund focused on investments in VR and AR and MR. Tipatat actually reached out to me last year, and he said, let's start researching the European market. Who are the players? Who's active in the industry? Because there was no research done properly before. So what have I done? I've set up calls and meetings with local VR ambassadors across Europe. So in a lot of countries, Italy, Switzerland, in the Netherlands, there was already a very active community. They already had meetups, so I reached out to the meetups, the founders of meetups, and I asked them, who are the players in your country that we should look out to? So this research went from September to December, early January. And together with the VR fund, based upon more than 300 startups, we selected the most important players in the field. So in this landscape, you see 116 companies. The best is to read the landscape from the bottom to the top. So the bottom is infrastructure companies, so hardware companies. A couple of important companies to note is, for example, MindMaze. MindMaze is a Swiss-based VR company that actually at some point raised 100 million in one round. So that's quite extraordinary if you look at the rest of the landscape. This was in 2016. In the middle, you have tools and platforms. At the left, you have distribution. In the middle, 3D tools, a lot of active companies there. And on the right, you have reality capture. And at the top, you have the applications that are more focused according to industries. The moment that this research was published, which was in February 2017 at Casual Connect, we didn't have enough startups with a commercial offering, with funding that were focused on sports only. A lot of companies, though, do focus, for example, in education. They also have a training for VR, for example, as part of their offering, but it was not specifically focused on sports solely. What is important about this landscape, when we published it, so I said 116 companies, 26 of those were UK-based, and then the second country after UK was France. So 19 companies were part of the first landscape, which was actually a true surprise for the whole industry. at that point in time, but actually I think it's logical because France as a government has been investing in startups and facilitating public funding, of ease of access to public funding from a couple of years now, and that's very, very evident in this first research and results. I'm actually updating the landscape as we speak, and we're going to publish the next version in July. The next version will be accompanied with an investment analysis done by Tech.eu, the publication. So they're going to really investigate which of these subsectors are receiving most funding, who are the investors, where are they based. So a complete overview of who is who in the European landscape on the level of VR. To come back on the topic of today, sports and VR, there are many use cases. We'll start with the market first. So the market in VR or XR today is estimated to be 70 billion by 2018. There's a lot of research, a lot of analysis, and a lot of estimations where the numbers really go up and down. And based upon this research already, there has been another publication who said, let's slash these numbers with almost 60%. But I think what is very important is from day one, from the moment that Oculus bought Facebook, Facebook bought Oculus in 2014, and all these market predictions around VR and AR and MR happened, sports and live events have always been the #1 use case and the #1 revenue generator for VR in the industry, and that didn't change. So I've looked at many use cases, and like I said, big part of VR is education, and that's also, of course, reflecting in sports. But next to that, of course, we have broadcasting in VR, so where you, as a company, not going to broadcast a 2D stream of content, but 360 stream or 180 degree stream. Recreating the game in VR, so where you're going to gather data and in real time simulate that in a virtual environment. Sports trainings, like I mentioned, normally part of the education vertical, and then more club-specific initiatives that are already covered a bit here today, for example, by StubHub yesterday, who are providing VR content to sell their seating in a stadium. So hospitality is an important one. Just give more access to content via VR, and also some clubs are using VR for player recruitment, so the players don't have to travel to the other side of the world to see what the club is all about. I quickly go over the main players in each of these use cases. I think for broadcasting, the #1 startup, I don't know if you can still call it a startup, is NextVR. They raised 100 million to focus on bringing the fan in front of the game, so at the front row. It's definitely live and on-demand streaming. It's definitely 360, so no 2D stream. They have been working on it since 7 years, and the first prototype they built was 3 years ago. So they have a lot of learnings related to camera position, how the presenter has to actually inform the viewer to look at the left or at the right if something important is happening. And the average viewing time has increased from 7 minutes to 42 minutes. Then again, what will be important throughout the rest of my presentation is that we as a company, we focus on distribution in VR. And most of the companies and the use cases I just presented, they distribute via native applications. So native applications are built for specific headsets natively. So if you want, as a publisher, be present on all VR headsets, then you have to build an app for the Samsung Gear VR, one for the Daydream, one for the Oculus Rift, one for the HTC Vive, and then also in most cases, as it's broadcasting, you also want to be available on iOS and Android. So I will always specify for these companies how they distribute. So for NextVR, their main distribution has been Samsung Gear VR, but they also recently added the Daydream. What is important to know for Samsung Gear VR, and most of the companies I will highlight have the Samsung Gear as a main distribution platform. There are estimated, the last research confirmed there are estimation of 5 million devices in the market. And this is not the US, this is internationally. So it's very, if you talk about maximizing reach, it's very difficult if you're looking at a maximum size of 5 million worldwide. The second one is actually a recent initiative that has been announced by Intel. Intel clearly moving into the VR industry with their own proposition, also consumer proposition called True VR. To get this from the ground, they partner up with the Major League Baseball, and actually, I didn't check it, but the first streaming should have happened yesterday. And they're going to do this on a weekly basis. Again here, distribution, get the app now. The app goes to the Samsung Gear VR. So they say they will roll out to other platforms, but the distribution today is focused on the Gear VR app. Livelike, it's a semi-European company, I can say. They're based in New York, but one of the co-founders is French. They also have a business development person here, very close to the venue, Samuel. So he's representing Lifelike in Europe. What they do is basically adding a very in-depth social layer to the experience. It's not a 360 stream or a 180 stream. It's actually a social watch party in VR. So it's a 2D stream or kind of a 2D screen experience that they bring in a social layer. Again, the way they distribute this is actually, they offer it to companies, so they have a very in-depth agreement with Fox. So they have distribution for Google Play, App Store, and Gear VR. So they really focus on the mobile as an entry level, and then also, of course, accommodate to go into the VR mode via the Gear VR. So the next is a little video. Can we play the video? This is actually showing what the added value is for Lifelike.
This is what the user sees on the regular screen. But in VR, you won't feel like you're staring at a screen. You'll feel like you're staring at a field.
Almost opened the door for Eddie Kimmanga.
We can take it even farther. Since you have the golden ticket, you can switch seats at will and see the action from the best angle at all times. But what's the ultimate fan cave without being able to share it? Livelike can also bring your friends to your virtual couch, no matter where they actually are, and gives you endless smack talk ammunition with voice over IP communication, live statistics, highlights, and replays. Anything a sports fan might need to ridicule his friend's pathetic team. A new medium means many new surprises. And here's my favorite part. While television halftime ads are a necessary evil, in VR, ads can be the best part of the show.
So another company focused on social experiences where you see actually 2D event happening is Altspace VR. Also definitely worth checking out. I'm quickly going to the other use cases. Recreating the game, there are two players. You have Beyond Sports, and actually that's a Dutch company. They focus on gathering data from players and then simulating in real time in a virtual reality experience. They have partnerships with Ajax and PSV. Again, they distribute via Samsung Gear VR. Same goes for Virtually Live. This is an American company. They add actually also voice over IP, so definitely also going for the social layer. Sports trainings, we have Strive VR. It's an American company where you, based on first-person recordings of a certain experience, try to educate the players on the different possible outcomes of a certain situation. They also distribute via the Gear VR. Sports Impro VR, also a Dutch company. It's similar as the previous one, where you have first-person training videos. And then for team-specific applications, there are a number of use cases already mentioned by the different teams here on stage yesterday. I think what I want to focus on is distribution. So this is the initiative of PSG. So they have an iPad app where you can have access to a virtual tour, where you can build your own avatar and have actually also social network at your disposal. But again, it's difficult to put an iPad in a Samsung Gear VR or a Daydream phone, so it's a nice gimmick and definitely very nice integrated and definitely adding value to the fans, but less a VR experience. So the problem is it's very difficult as a publisher to make the right investment choices today. And it's not about the content necessarily only, it's about the market. There's a low market penetration of VR in general. Like I mentioned, Samsung Gear VR, 5 million headsets in the market. If you then look at mobile first, if you decide to roll out a 360 app on a VR-compatible phone or not VR-compatible phone, there's still the issue that today people are no longer downloading apps. This is statistics from Tony Parisi, and he's the web VR guru at Unity. He's very well known, and I follow his keynotes a lot. And this is one of the slides I think is very important and indicates that people are checking or downloading no longer apps, but actually checking Facebook and Twitter, which is in fact a curated stream of online of web resources that they actually selected. So if you are in a market where most of the headsets today are too expensive for the consumer, they're inconvenient, putting up an Oculus or an HTC Vive is really not like easy and a nice experience for the first time. It's a complicated interface. People are no longer downloading apps. And for the publisher, it's very fragmented. So if you did an experiment in 360, if you invested in true 360 immersive storytelling, then the result today will almost always be that you have a low return on investment. It's good to test the way the reality has to be captured. You test a lot of things, but to reach a maximum audience, that is truly difficult. So a study by Business Intelligence in October 2016 concluded that 55% never tried a VR device experience, and most people, actually 84%, never had the opportunity. To indicate the ideal user journey, you can start the video. To indicate the ideal user journey to our clients, I mostly refer to my first interactive experience. This was in October 2013 when I was working in London. I had a Moto X. At that part, Motorola was part of Google, and there was a red hat on my screen. I opened my phone, and immediately my phone went into full screen, and this animation started to play. I was sitting down at my desk, and I was completely intrigued, and I was like, what is this content, and where does this content come from? I had direct access, and it was also not only nice images, but it was also nice sound. So it was also immediately clear for me that by following the hat, I was following the narrative, and at this point in time, I had to stand up from my desk and walk around in the office. People were asking me questions like, what are you doing? And I was so excited, I was so intrigued by the content that I didn't have time to answer to their questions. So it took me actually till the next day to find out this was an interactive story, that was an experiment by Motorola and Google, and that this would be the start of a new interactive story, a new medium. So why am I showing this? Because it was actually an experience that was activated by myself. It was on my mobile, I had direct access, it was emotional, I had a wow effect, and I wanted to continue the experience. And this is actually what is important for VR today. We have to educate the consumer, trigger them, make them curious, to make them understand that this is a new medium, and that it's truly a different experience than putting 360 in a 2D interface. So WebVR didn't exist, but it exists today. It's been prototyped in 2014 by engineers by Google, and it's a large community, developer community, that is growing every day. It's large industry support from Google, Facebook, also iOS. Actually, Apple finally announced their support towards VR and enable WebVR on their desktop today, so soon it will be as well on their mobile. So it provides you instant access to VR. It's not only desktop and mobile, it's also headsets. And also a very interesting journey is not to underestimate the journey from a mobile to a headset. So VR compatible phones where you from the browser can go to the VR headset. It's easy integration of web data because it is a web-based platform, so you can easily integrate Facebook Connect or Wikipedia APIs or Twitter APIs. It's an open ecosystem, so as a developer you have a lot of tools available, and it's powerful. You can have 90 frames per second on a desktop and 60 frames per second on a mobile. Like I mentioned, phone makers see the opportunity. By the end of the year, 11 VR-compatible phones will be on the market. So that was 4 last year, 11 this year, which makes it much more visible for the consumer as well. So this is basically what we do. We're a technology company. We focus on web VR, and we're building prototypes in web VR today. A lot of people ask me, can you play the video? A lot of people ask me what has been done and which use cases. I'm going to show you. This one is so important to know. This is on the web. It's an application where you can have interactivity. It's a car configurator for a Renault. So as a user on your mobile via the magic window, you can already have tools for interactivity. But of course, the added value is if you would have a headset available, that you can have this experience in a headset, which makes it a lot more immersive. So there is interactivity possible. You can change the interior of the car. There's video possible as well. This is a 2D video, but it can as well be a 360 video. The next one, you can play the next one, is much more for high-end brands. We can do this quite shortly. It's a Paris-based gallery. Should play. Can you go to the next one, please? It's a Paris-based gallery called Monochrome. Okay, it's okay, we'll do this one. This is actually a player that we have built for the Belgian broadcaster, so we're focused a lot on media. It's a screen recording from a Samsung Gear phone, so an Android phone, so it's not a fancy promo video. So you will see that you're immediately transported into an architectural house in Belgium where you can go from one room to the other. What is important, this is not only on the web, this is also available in a headset. So when you would go to the VR mode, which is actually pressing the VR goggles icon, the player will detect where you are. If it's just a normal phone, it will indicate go to a cardboard. If you're on a VR compatible phone, it will detect put up a Samsung Gear VR or your Daydream. If you're on a desktop and you have an Oculus connected, it will detect it as well, and it will show the images in the headsets. So you see one 360 video, but actually it's an application that runs on all platforms that are web VR supported. This is the one that has been, it's a Paris-based studio. They normally focus on building applications for offline activations. So they build an application for VR that is visible in their visible in their shops. But they're also increasingly focused on 360 and web VR. So this is immediately another experience. Of course, if the screen moves to the right, it's you that actually is moving from left to right. So what we build is VR applications in web VR. The user journey for us, if it's B2B2C, of course, it starts from a mobile browser. After the mobile browser, we preferably advise a client to have an interactive experience that is already worthwhile viewing on a mobile in 360. Then actually invite the end user to go into the VR mode and then have an overview of content that is available behind. So basically, we're building immersive sites. To make it a bit more applicable to what we're discussing today, we didn't build a prototype for sports yet, but what we're building for media and other segments is as well replicable for sports. So the user journey starts on a mobile. As a publisher, you add the VR goggles icon to your website. We advise not to show what's behind, because putting 360 content on a 2D web page is like putting desktop site on a mobile without any configurations. So if you invest in building 360 content or VR content, make it or package it so that the user is interested and can be wowed with what's behind it. So if they press on the VR goggles icon, they immediately see that they're in a new experience, that it's 360, that's immersive. They can actually navigate by touch. That's standard in WebVR. And then, of course, they can stay in the magic window and they can go to the first experience. But ideally, at this point, they press the VR goggles icon, they have a VR-compatible phone or a cardboard reader, and they can continue the experience in full immersion. Of course, there are questions with rights here. There can be other ways to present content. What is, for example, a very good way to start this immersive layer on your website is to, for example, request your fans to upload 360 content, and then you make a mashup of the fans at a stadium in 360 as part of one of the content blocks. So it doesn't have to be content that is protected. So everyone here has to be a bit more creative, but I think what my message is today is that creative agencies will become immersive agencies, and brands will all give access to an immersive layer to their site. It's of course the responsibility of the publisher what content you give to it, but the technology exists. So again, if you build an app in WebVR, you're immediately available across 7 platforms. So it's not only mobile and desktop, but also the most important headsets. Like I said, iOS was always a problem, but soon that will be one of the platforms that is supported as well. To end the presentation, I just wanted to give a little bit of promotion to an event that we're organizing at the end of the year in December. We call it the Oscars of VR. So if you need more information, this is the site. So thank you for your attention.